Everybody, this is Ronald Long with the Youth Ministry Insider. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening. Today I want to tell you about criticism because I'm bad at it. Whenever I would get criticized in youth ministry, it took a long time for me to not take it as just a personal attack, because most of the time whenever I would hear criticism in youth ministry, it would feel like it was not a criticism of the ministry, but a criticism of me personally, or even, my character, or who I was, or the vision that I had. And so, if you're anything like I was in youth ministry, then you probably have a hard time dealing with criticism as well. And let's be real, nobody really loves being told what they're doing wrong. And if you do, that's on you. And I don't understand you. I'm glad God made you who you are, but that's weird. And I don't get it. But you're not weird. Of course you're not weird. The the issue though is when you have criticism in youth ministry, you can not know what to do with it. Right. So maybe you think, all right, I'm just going to ignore everything. Like no matter what criticism I hear, I'm going to ignore it because it is not worth my time. Well, I don't think that's a great idea. That's probably something you should not do, because if you ignore all criticism all the time, well, then you're going to miss some potentially really good opportunities to improve, right? And so don't ignore everything. But at the same time, and this is really important, don't take every criticism to heart and make an immediate change based on that criticism. Because at that point, you are no longer doing your ministry, the ministry you feel God has called you to do. Instead, you are doing only the ministry other people feel called to do. Now, there's a balance there, right? So we don't want to ignore all criticism all the time, and we don't want to implement every small bit of feedback that we receive from someone. So how do we figure out what it looks like to actually respond to criticism? All right, so I have a few things. And the first thing we want to do is you want to find the truth in the criticism, right? And I'm calling it criticism. It might be called feedback. It might be received as critique. It might be received as, hey, I just have a suggestion for you. It might be someone's yelling in your face. So there's a whole bunch of things that this could be. When I say criticism, what I mean here is really someone is critiquing something about the youth ministry that you are in charge of. Right? Because somebody can say something about the youth ministry that maybe you don't have anything to be in charge of, right? Maybe it is mandated to you that youth group has to meet on Wednesday from 7 to 9, right? And that's because the building is being used every other night of the week, or that's because that's the only time when you have volunteers who can help out, or that's because your supervisor tells you that's when youth group is and you don't have a say in it. Right? Criticism when you don't have a say in it isn't a critique of you. You need to move that up the chain and say, oh, thank you for bring that to my attention. I can't do anything about that. You can talk to Pastor so-and-so, right? Because that's their call. And it's okay to acknowledge those things. Hey, this is not my call. This was actually mandated to me, right? So that's okay. What I mean when I say criticism are things that you are actually in charge of as a youth pastor. When I first started in youth ministry, I was given the reins of a ministry that was actually pretty rough, right? And if you've been in youth ministry for a long time, you might understand we want to have really good Bible study type of way of doing youth ministry that's very deep and focused. And then there's an outreach way of doing Bible study that is, hey, let's go out into the community, make sure that they come in and it's very open to everyone, want to be very inviting. Of course, you can do both, but usually you might stem more towards, hey, outreach, or more towards in-depth Bible study, and find it difficult to do both very, very well. I inherited a ministry that was very outreach, but because of that, the ministry was attracting students who were very different. Some rough around the edges, some over the age of 18. We got rid of that pretty quick, but some who were just not churched. And because they weren't churched, some of them were a little rowdy, some of them cursed a lot, some of them had never been to a church at any other time at all. And so Wednesday night program and a rural church in Tennessee was the first time that they had been to church. And they would never go on a Sunday morning. So what I was hearing from parents was criticism. Wednesday night isn't safe, right? So that would be the criticism that I would get. Wednesday night isn't safe. Okay, so let's then role play how to find some truth in that. Like, hey, Ronald, Wednesday night's not safe. I hear there are lots of drugs. I hear there's lots of swearing going on. I hear there's lots of kids who come from really rough backgrounds, and I don't want my kid around students like that. Say that is the criticism that you receive, because it is the criticism that I was receiving in my very first youth ministry when I first started out. All right, so here's how you find the truth in that. Hey, Ronald, it's not safe. I don't want my kids around those kids. They're rough. They cuss. They are, they're doing drugs, all this kind of stuff. All right. First is to take a step and observe the emotion. So we're dealing with parents, right? Parents, maybe volunteers, maybe just concerned members of the church, but predominantly parents who are seeing an issue with the youth ministry and wanting you to fix it, right? Well, the first thing you got to do is see the emotion and acknowledge that it's there. This parent is probably upset, maybe for a lot of different reasons. They really enjoyed youth group when they were a kid, and so now they want their kid to enjoy youth group, but how can they if it's not safe and they're hearing drugs and all this stuff? And you want to try to acknowledge that a parent or anyone who's coming to you with a criticism probably has some emotion attached to it, and you want to observe that emotion and just recognize that it's there. Because sometimes you can dial it down. Sometimes you can try to understand how that emotion might be clouding the judgment of whoever is coming to you with a critique. And as the leader, you need to see the emotion, acknowledge it, but then also try to back it up just a little bit, all right? And see what's going on down past the emotion. The next thing is to check your heart as the youth pastor. Because if there's critique going on, you'll probably be like me in that moment and think, well, I'm in charge. Or you're not critiquing the ministry, you're critiquing me. And then that's where pride gets into it. And that's where I know pride always took me, is I felt like I was being personally attacked for what was going on. And you need to acknowledge that, because you might not respond with grace and love if what you are hearing is a personal attack. So check your heart. The next thing is to look for an objective critique. All right, so inside what might feel like the attack or the negative or all of the problems that are going around, is there an objective thing you can change? Ronald, the ministry is not safe on Wednesday night. Okay, well, for me, I could walk into that ministry and I could see, yeah, there were some changes that needed to be made. For example, there were people who were involved in the ministry who were older than 18, graduated high school, but still coming to a Wednesday night youth program. And for me, I could say, hey, I see what's going on here right now, and I actually agree with you on some measures, right? We just need to have students participating in youth ministry. We don't need adults. And so I was able to share with parents at that moment, hey, we're making some pretty big changes here, some pretty substantial efforts to make sure that only youth are involved on Wednesday night. And by that, we are going to make it safer, right? Because I could see that there was an objective thing, an objective critique that was valid and needed to be changed. And then next, see if you can take an action step. For us, that was checking students in when they came, right? So when they showed up, we would say, okay, what grade are you in? Oh, you're in 7th grade through 12th grade? Fantastic. You're welcome. Come on in. That involved having volunteers around who were available and could help out. That involved having people who were checking students at the door. That involved, in some cases, checking on the high school the next day and saying, hey, is this student actually enrolled in high school? And we began to, over time, have people who were checking on these students and making sure that only students who were actually enrolled in high school were coming and taking part in our ministry. And for that reason, I was then able to turn around to a parent and say, hey, I agree with you. Youth group should be safe. We share that in common. And so since I agree with you and we both want to head in the same direction, well then, hey, I've let you know I'm going to make this change. And youth group is going to be safe because only students are going to be involved in our youth group program, right? And then once we were able to do that, we could make that decision and then move on and go with the direction that we had made. And by doing that, we had found the truth in the criticism, made a change, and then enacted the change. And we were able to go with that. And so if you're finding yourself on the receiving end of criticism, my encouragement to you is to, instead of just responding to the emotion or ignoring it or saying, oh, this is a personal attack on me, do these steps instead. See the emotion, check your own heart, look for an objective critique, ask if you should or can make a change, then decide that change and move on. Youth pastor, you've got this. I believe in you. And even when you find yourself in the middle of criticism, you can handle this. God's using you to do great things, and he might even be doing it sometime this week at youth group. I'm Ronald Long with Youth Ministry Insider. Thanks so much for hanging out. We'll see you around.